Hey everybody, Brad with Full Spectrum Survival. I am at one of the largest dollar stores that I've ever been to, and I have $1 that I can spend towards my preparedness budget. A lot of individuals think that you need $10, $100, $5,000 to add to your preparedness measures just to be ready for that disaster to strike. I'm going to show you today that $1, just one, can save your life. When a disaster strikes, everyone's stress levels are going to be elevated. They're going to be exposed to expenditures of physical activity and physical stressors that they may be never prepared for. Let's see, $1 could get us around 1,000 calories. Maybe some socks, Tinder pouch. Today we went to the dollar store and we looked for an item that for $1 on our preparedness budget can better ready ourselves to save a life, maybe even save our own life. This is tempting. The novelization of Independence Day. For anyone who hasn't seen Independence Day, it's definitely a movie worth seeing. I'll just give you the synopsis from the back. Hybrid fighters merging human and alien technology. Massive cannon emplacements on the moon and Mars. A planetary defense force with the finest military personnel ever trained. For 2 decades, we've known the enemy would return. The nation of Earth has collaborated on a unified nations of Earth have collaborated on a unified defense program designed to defend the planet. So same thing, $1 is going to get you 1,000 calories worth of vanilla wafers. That's not really a good trade-off for your money. Candy galore, of course. Toothbrushes, 4-pack. These little travel bottles, they can be used to carry your spices or even sanitizers. Okay, now we're talking. This is the medicine aisle at the dollar store, and of course it's not going to be the highest quality of medicine. You're not going to find the best name brand stuff here. You're definitely not going to find prescription medication, but what you are going to find is medicine that can help you in the event of a disaster that you wouldn't otherwise have. You might not use this for yourself. You might put it in a barter box, which is a box that you'll use to barter with other people, or you might use it in a disaster setting. You might use it once a crisis strikes. I'm going to look for something particular here that I know will help you either save your life or somebody else's when that disaster strikes. Look at this. We've got 100% pure turmeric. Turmeric is an anti-inflammatory. It can also be used as a blood thinner. Children's pain relief. Vicks vapor rubs. Tons of cough drops. Lots of vitamins, that's good preventative care. Milk of magnesia here. Then you've got some name brand here. You've got some Aleve. You have some acetaminophen. You have, I'm sure they've got some ibuprofen here. Now, here is what I'm looking for. You have 2 different choices, 3 different choices. aspirin. You have your low dose, 81 milligrams, your low dose enteric coated, so this is going to be covered, and they might both actually be enteric coated. So this one being an off-brand does not say whether it is or not. And then you have your 325 milligram aspirin. Ready? Are you helping somebody already?
Yeah, somebody's coming.
Okay.
107.
107.
You want the bag?
No, that's okay. We'll save the oil.
Saving.
Thank you, ma'am.
Have a nice day.
You too. All right, well, we've got what we came here for, something that you can add to your preparedness budget. Let's take it home and talk about it, and then maybe think over some of the other things that we'll get next time we're able to spend $1 or more here. When a disaster strikes, everyone's stress levels are going to be elevated. They're going to be exposed to expenditures of physical activity and physical stressors that they maybe never prepared for. Maybe they weren't in peak physical condition for. And it's during these disasters, during the recovery phase, or even just living through the crisis itself, that the body will be taxed to a point that it might find it breaks at. That is why we each must prepare for each other. The first, preventative medicine, is taking care of ourselves. The second is being ready for what happens if that's not enough. Today, we went to the dollar store and we looked for an item that for $1 on our preparedness budget can better ready ourselves to save a life, maybe even save our own life. When you look at medicine used around the world, the majority of medicine for a cardiovascular crisis is rest, followed by aspirin. Those are the non-surgical procedures. If you come to somebody or somebody comes to you and they are experiencing the symptoms of an impending heart attack, you're told to chew aspirin to get it into your body, non-enteric coated aspirin, to get it into your body as quickly as possible with a glass of water and lay down and rest. And you're going to lay down and rest until medical help can come to you. That is what medical physicians will tell you. That's what disaster preparedness physicians will tell you. Again, we're not doctors, but we're using doctors here to better ourselves and to better prepare ourselves for the event of a disaster. Let's look at two different articles. One is from Harvard Medicine. This is on health.harvard.edu. Aspirin for a heart attack, chew or swallow. Immediate first aid works to minimize blood clotting triggered by plaque ruptures. So a heart attack can be brought out by plaque, which each one of us will have to varying degrees in our veins and in our blood that gets pumped through our heart. Once that plaque moves in and creates a blockade, you're going to have a cardiovascular crisis. How should you take aspirin for a heart attack? The article asks. You've always been healthy, but you seem to run out of steam at your wife's 60th birthday last week, and we can alter that a little bit to say you've gotten more tired expending energy after an earthquake or after a social crisis. You're not able to catch your breath. And now your chest feels heavy. It continues, as if you're in a vice. You take some antacids, even though it's 7 a.m. and you haven't even had breakfast, again saying that this is not usual. You're not usually experiencing these types of symptoms, but you get no relief and the pain is spreading to your jaw and shoulder. You call your wife, who takes one look at you and rushes to emergency services. Again, in the event of a disaster, you're not going to have access to emergency services, but what you have today is $1. And just like I did, I hope that you will go down to a dollar store, a convenience store, a thrift store, anywhere that sells inexpensive first aid medication and get a bottle of aspirin. Your wife got it right. It continues. You may be having a heart attack and you may need to get medical attention fast, but you also need to get aspirin into your system quickly. The question arises for many people, should you chew it or should you swallow it? The reason you need aspirin is the same reason that you need medical attention without delay. The article from Harvard continues, and we remember that this is considering our current time of emergency response. In the event of a long-duration emergency or even just a localized crisis, emergency response is going to be limited or non-existent at all. A heart attack is a dynamic event, and early intervention can limit any and all damage. The paramedics can give you oxygen and medication, and they'll monitor your blood pressure and heart rhythm. In the hospital, doctors will take EKGs if you have access to that type of thing. In modern cardiology, it's its best, and it has improved considerably. Most heart attacks develop when a cholesterol-laden plaque in a coronary artery ruptures. Relatively small plaques, which produce only partial blockages, are the ones most likely to rupture. When they do, they attract platelets to their surface. Platelets are tiny blood cells that trigger blood clotting. A clot or a thrombus builds up on the ruptured plaque. As the clot grows, it blocks the artery. If the blockage is complete, it deprives a portion of your heart from much needed oxygen. As a result, the muscle cells die, and it's called a heart attack. Aspirin helps by inhibiting these platelets. The word inhibiting means stopping. You inhibit the ability for these platelets to build on the plaque. Only a tiny amount is needed to inhibit all of the platelets in the bloodstream. In fact, they say, small amounts are better than high doses, but since the clot grows minute by minute, time is of the essence. When you look at emergency first aid that is meant for third world countries, places where it might take 3 days to get to emergency services because the people are going by carrier services or they're going by foot, and so they don't have access to just picking up that phone and dialing 911. It's those types of emergency preparedness measures that we need to take note of. And in those measures, they say take an aspirin and rest. And you're going to continue to rest, laying down in a supine position until you can get help. You're not going to want to continue exerting energy. You're not going to want to continue putting pressure on your heart or physical stress on your heart. You want to let the aspirin do its job and completely rest. Remember that. Aspirin helps by inhibiting platelets. To find out how aspirin works fastest, researchers in Texas asked 12 volunteers to take a 325 milligram dose of aspirin. That's exactly what we got here for $1. $1 got us 125 tablets of 325 milligrams of aspirin. Enough to save your life. Enough, if you were using that over a large scale, to save 125 lives. There's no reason we shouldn't have this in our kit. They asked 12 volunteers to take a standard 325 milligram dose of aspirin in 3 different ways: by swallowing it with 4 ounces of water, by chewing the tablet for 30 seconds beforehand, or by drinking 4 ounces of water with Alka-Seltzer. Each subject tried all 3 methods on an empty stomach on different days. The scientists monitored blood levels of aspirin and its active ingredient, salicylate, at frequent intervals, and they also measured thromboxane, B2 or TXB2, an indicator of platelet activation that drops as platelets are inhibited. By all 3 measurements, chewed aspirin worked the fastest. It needed only 5 minutes to reduce platelets in the blood to concentrations by 50%. Alka-Seltzer took 8 minutes, and then swallowed took 12 minutes. So think about that for a moment. It only needed a few minutes, 5 minutes, to reduce the platelets to a point that it would halt, inhibit, slow the effects of, or assist in the recovery of a cardiovascular crisis. Aspirin can help prevent heart attacks in people with coronary artery disease and in those who have a higher than average risk. Only low dose, usually 81 milligrams a day, is needed, but people who think they may be having a cardiovascular crisis need an extra 325 milligrams, even if they've already taken that 81 milligrams. For best results, chew a single full-size 325 milligram tablet, but don't use an enteric-coated tablet, which acts slowly even if it's chewed. And also don't forget to seek medical care. It's a contemporary update on the old reminder to take 2 aspirin and call in the morning. Remember, most of the people here will remember that adage. And it's good advice, they say, in pun, to chew over. Heart failure is manageable. To learn the mechanics of the heart, they go on and discuss different things. Let's read a little bit more. This is from an article on the National Institute of Health. Aspirin therapy is well accepted as an agent for the secondary prevention of cardiovascular events, and current guidelines also define a role for aspirin in primary prevention. This is from a number of different physicians. Remember, this channel isn't a medical channel. We don't give medical advice. This is taking medical advice from physicians and adapting it to our preparedness measures. In this review, we describe the seminal trials of aspirin use in the context of current guidelines. They go on to say a couple of different things. It says that aspirin is the most widely used drug in medicine, and that's with good measure. Certainly, there are individuals who shouldn't take aspirin unless there's a cardiovascular crisis, especially low dose over a period of time aspirin, because it is hard on the stomach. And so if you are prone to stomach ulcers, taking a low dose of aspirin every day is going to raise the risk of a gastrointestinal issue, which in itself can lead to crisis down the road. But in the event of a cardiovascular emergency, it's good to take it anyway. In 2007, the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality reported that 20% of adults in the U.S. reported taking aspirin daily or every other day. That's a figure, isn't it? 20% of the hundreds of millions take it every day or every other day, with this number increasing to nearly 50% as those aged 65 or older. Aspirin is also one of the oldest drugs in use. When the bark of the willow tree was famous for its analgesic and anti-inflammatory properties, records show its widespread use in ancient Mesopotamian, Greek, and Chinese civilizations. In 1758, quite a time ago, in the first recorded clinical trial in history, Reverend Edward Stone of the Royal Society of London demonstrated the efficacy of ground dried bark from the English willow tree for treating symptoms of malaria. However, aspirin as we know it today was not introduced to the public till 1904, following a series of attempts to extract and purify salicylic acid from the willow bark. Remember, we can go and get salicylic acid from the willow bark. If you're thinking about what should I be planting on my homestead this year, what should I be looking for out in the woods nearby? Look for the willow tree and make sure it has a high concentration of salicylic acid in the bark. In addition to its anti-inflammatory properties, aspirin was also observed to increase bleeding time, and later studies demonstrated the utility of it as an antithrombotic agent. It was not until 1971 that its exact pharmacological mechanism and action of irreversible COX inhibition and related suppression of prostaglandin production was discovered. Remember, there are many reasons. They've shown that aspirin can halt a person's cancer growth. They've shown that it can stop a heart attack. They've shown that it has anti-inflammatory properties. So many different things. It is definitely a boon to your preparedness measures. Low-dose aspirin regimens can effectively suppress platelet aggregation without affecting important cell functions. In contrast, inhibition of inflammatory cell function requires higher, more frequent dosing, they say. The majority of drawbacks, and we should cover this, to continuous use is a risk of major gastrointestinal and more rarely intracranial bleeding of the brain, which is not anything that anybody wants. The use of low-dose aspirin regimen as an antithrombotic measure has become increasingly common, they say. However, recent evidence suggests discrepancies exist between clinical guidelines and how it's used in the public setting. So it talks about secondary prevention. Patients who have already suffered a CVD or cardiovascular disease or event, such as myocardial infarction or ischemic stroke, are at a very high risk for another event. Goes on to say why individuals should use aspirin. Secondary prevention following a serious event is necessitated by the high risk for a repeat event. The notion that aspirin could be used for primary CVD prevention existed before its well-established use for secondary prevention. So if you have somebody come to you and they're experiencing the symptoms of a heart attack or the chance that they might be nearing that, wouldn't you like to have that life-saving medicine on hand? Wouldn't you like to have it for yourself? Maybe you are a more loner type and you don't expect to be around very many people if a long-duration emergency takes place. During the recovery phase, it might just be you. If you start experiencing those symptoms, wouldn't you like the ability to just chew up an aspirin and lay down and rest? And then you can seek additional medical care. Then you can find people nearby who have maybe some specialized tools or the ability to get you to facilities that are still operating and still assisting and helping people. Even during massive wars, if we look at what is happening in Syria right now, people are still able to find medical care. It's not easy. You're not calling emergency services and they're not coming to pick you up. But if you can make it to the hospital, which is guarded by either the majority or the army of that nation or its opposition, you're going to be able to get emergency medical care to one degree or another. But wouldn't you like to be able to make it there? This is all it takes, is $1 at the dollar store to save your life or the life of someone you love or the life of a stranger. Guys, I hope you'll take this cue and get out there, and even if you just have $1 to your name, pick this item up and put it in your kit. A special thank you to each one of you for being here with us. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the alert icon, the little bell, so you get alerted every time a new video comes out. This preparedness update has been brought to us in part by EMPshield.com, a world first in proven EMP and lightning shield products for your entire home. If you use the code FSS, you're going to receive $50 off of each product, as well as NorthPointAxe.com. They hand forge axes, knives, and swords, and whether you're protecting yourself or building a shelter, you need an axe that you can count on. Use the code FSS10, you'll get 10% off of your order. And CoreEssentials.com, firearm belts that are engineered to give you comfort while you carry peace of mind. Again there, use the code FSS10. These supporters do a great job by giving our viewers more that they can save on. Use the code FSS10 there. You're going to get 10% off of your order. From my family to you and yours, please stay safe, remain vigilant, continue building your preparedness measures, and keep watch.